Hey folks, it's Issa Haddad here. I got some good news and a special invitation for you to come see me here at Sunrise Collierville. Come on down, check out my inventory with new, pre-owned, and certified vehicles to choose from. I can get you financed when no one else can. Come on by, bring your family. I treat you like family. Come see me, Issa, here at the #1 dealership in the Mid-South, 4605 Houston Levy Road, Sunrise, Collierville. Come on down, check out my inventory with hundreds of vehicles to choose from, pre-owned, new, and certified.
Good news from Sunrise Chevrolet. Get in your new vehicle today. Come on in. I see Issa. Bankrupt's okay. Bad credit, it's okay. Let Issa put you in your brand new truck or car today when you shop at Sunrise Chevrolet Collierville.
And don't forget, ask for me.
So you gonna play my intro? Well, see, when you look at somebody like me, I grew up here. There's nothing you can tell me about Memphis that I don't already know. There's nothing you can tell me about Memphis.
From the boardroom to the streets.
I don't already know.
With Mike from Memphis, man. Together, we can fix things. Really?
When you say, I want to be treated fairly, and I want a voice.
Yeah. He saw things weren't fair, so he chose to run for mayor. You get up and do something when you really care. It's Memphis 360.
I'm with you. In the meantime,
it's Memphis 360.
In the meantime, in between time, we got folks shooting people up out the frame. Anybody said a word. We've become accustomed to people dying in this city.
Yeah. It's Memphis 360.
Turning the TV on and the news and see our loved ones and see young people that are out of control. And now you see, okay. We talk about incarceration. We talk about the youth. We talk about giving them the ability. We talk about investing in young people and investing in the community. See, I hate ignorance. I hate when people make decisions about things and they make statements and they haven't done their research.
How can you fix the problem when you don't even know what the problem is?
We need some help in this city. We need some help in this city.
It's Memphis 360.
See, I hate
It's Memphis 360.
And good evening. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Memphis 360, the television show that takes you from the boardroom to the streets. It is February, which is Black History Month. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Black History Month. But before I get into that, I want to send a shout out to the Jones family. The Jones, James and Joyce, they lost their daughter. She was 24 years old. She succumbed to her illnesses. My heart and my prayers go out to the Jones family. I also want to send a shout out because, man, we are leaving here. I want to send a shout out to Aisha Taylor. I just learned out on my way to the studio that she lost her grandmother. Our heart and our prayers go out to her grandmother as well. And I also want to send a shout out to Jacob's family, my son, one of his high school friends, Jacob Ropolov. I believe that's his name. It was hard to pronounce, and I was trying to get it from my son when I was on my way to the studio. But Jacob's been in my house 1,000 times. I don't know. Jacob succumbed to his illnesses as well, and we sent a shout out to his mom and his family, Tracy. Man, I'm praying for all of you guys. I pray that God sends a comforter, that he allows you the ability to be able to deal with those things that you are going through at this particular time. I also want to deal with, before I get into Black History Month, the elephant in the room. A lot of people started texting me and inboxing me in regards to Thaddeus Matthews. And I did put a post up and I asked people to pray for Thaddeus. Some people understood it, some people didn't. A lot of my North Memphis connection, they knew exactly what was going on. And those that truly believe in Christ, they knew what was going on. Because people were inboxing me and they were letting me know that Thaddeus had gotten sick, you know, I'm trying to get to heaven. I can't understand, and it ain't my business what everybody else trying to do, but I'm trying to get to heaven. Thaddeus has been a friend of mine for a long time. I've known him since high school, since our Manassas days, lived in New Chicago, all of that. And when I heard of his illnesses, yes, I asked people to pray. I prayed because I don't want to see anybody that's sick. I don't want to see anybody leave this place before they have to. So it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I definitely ask for prayer. That's the least that I could do because I am trying to get to heaven and I'm trying to see God and I'm trying to do the things that God puts on my heart and ordains that I do. So I want to make sure that I put that out there because some people's like, man, I can't believe you praying for him. I can't believe you're not. Man, I can't believe after all the things he said about you. It does not matter. That's on him. I have to answer to God for the things that I do. And I'm going to make sure to the best of my ability that I get into heaven. And I'm going to make sure to the best of my ability that I do the things that God put on my heart, regardless of everything. Look, Tawana Murphy's my friend. I talked to Tawana. In the past, I've talked to Thaddeus. I talked to Miss Debbie. I talked to everybody. You know, they got their own relationships. But I can only answer for Mike Williams. So, yes, I asked everybody on my page to say a prayer for restoration and for healing. I saw on one of the pages that he may have had a couple of strokes. I saw somebody inform me today that he may have left the hospital already. And if that is the case, then that is a blessing. I'm glad. And I hope that he is fully restored so that he can do the things that he do, whatever that is and whatever he chooses to do. And just like I said on my page, that's all that I am going to say about this, but I felt like I need to address it because people kept talking to me or inboxing me in regards to it. And I even had a conversation with my wife, and I told her, you know, baby, I have people inboxing me, and they're saying, why would you pray for Thaddeus? And my wife, right off the bat, the first thing she said is, why wouldn't you? Even though she knows the tumultuous relationship that Thaddeus and I have had. Yes, he talks about me. Yes, he talks about Clerk Brown. Yes, he talks about all of that stuff. But see, I realized a long time ago, and I told people, Thaddeus is a shock jock, and that's what he does. And he tries to invoke individuals to be able to respond. I just never respond because, you know, the Bible also says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So I don't have to take steps to be able to answer a lot of the things that Thaddeus may put out there because he knows what the truth is and he knows what's going on. So, but it wasn't about all of that, you know. I just felt as though Thaddeus was probably in a bad way. He was going through some things. And from what I'm getting, if he was having a couple of strokes, those are life-threatening issues. And I don't wish that upon anybody. I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. I just hope that he is restored and that, you know, he comes back, uses his platform to be able to do great and wonderful, positive things in the community. And that's all I am going to say about that. But I just felt like I needed to respond. So guess what? It is Black History Month, and that's what I wanted to talk about. on my show today. I wanted to talk about Black history. You know, the city of Memphis is so rich when it comes to Black history. But I want to thank those that marched for equality during the civil rights movement. I want to thank those that had fire hoses turned on them while marching, to include right here in the city of Memphis. I want to thank those that stood up against those German shepherds that were being put on them in the 60s and 50s and during the civil rights movement when it was at its peak. I want to thank those young girls that gave their lives in Birmingham, Alabama, that were blown up in a church, people. I want to thank those that rode the buses into the South, and they were called the Freedom Riders. And see, and this wasn't just, and we got to stop this, because it wasn't just Black people that rode those buses into the South. It wasn't just the Black people that sat in at the lunch counters. It wasn't just Black people that were buried in levees down in Mississippi. Those were Black people. Those were white people. You had Asian. You had all kinds of ethnic groups intertwined to fight for civil rights of those that individuals of color. You know, I want to thank those that sit in at the lunch counters, that had their faces spat in, that had stuff put all over them. You know, I want to thank those that were the first ones to desegregate schools. And when you go and look at history, you see these little babies that have to be escorted in by the FBI. You see these little babies that have to be guarded by the National Guards. But see, those are the ones that came before us. When I talk about standing on the shoulders of individuals that have come before us, that's what these people endured. I mean, children, I mean, high school students. A lot of that was happening back during that time were the high school students that were walking out. A lot of that, you know, and I'm going to talk about the city of Memphis and civil rights as well. But, you know, those young people put themselves in harm's way. I mean, these marches that we're having now, yeah, you know, they're for rights and they're for certain things that people believe in. But back then, the police had no restrictions. Back then, the individuals that ran the cities had no hearts. They felt as though their way of life was being threatened, so therefore they were going to do anything they could to prevent a lot of these young people from integrating the lunch counters, integrating the water fountains, integrating public places, integrating buses, just the ability to be able to ride public transportation that you pay your taxes for. I want to thank those individuals that were out in the cotton fields, those individuals that toiled in the sun all day, carrying those bales of cotton, those 23-foot cotton sacks, those 30-foot cotton sacks. I want to thank those individuals. See, we done got so complacent and so comfortable where we are right now, to whereas we don't think about a lot of the stuff that these individuals had to go through. I want to thank those individuals that integrated the armed forces and went into the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps. And even though they were not afforded a lot of the rights, even back here in the United States, they still went off to defend democracy in this country. They went over to fight, supposedly, for democracy in other countries, yet they were not afforded the rights right here in the United States. Now, when I say all of this, I don't want to take anything from my Italian brothers. I don't want to take anything from my Jewish brothers. I don't want to take anything from my Islamic brothers. I don't want to take anything from the Caucasian. I don't want to take anything from the Asian or the Hispanic. You know, I put a post up on my page and I said, I am proud to be a black man. I am proud of my heritage. Because those that came before me, they endured so much, and they endured it with intelligence. They endured it with resiliency. A lot of the things that have happened in this country, believe it or not, was done by not only Caucasians, not only Asians, not only Hispanics, not only Italians, not only Irish, but guess what? The African American community has contributed so much to the building and the defense of this country. So yes, I am proud to be an African American. I can't be anything else. I am okay with the skin that I am in. You know, a lot of times individuals try to make it appear as though you should be something else, or you should try to assimilate to other cultures because their cultures are better than your culture. I'm going to tell you that when I came up here in the city of Memphis, the African American culture was probably one of the best things going, and definitely as far as I knew, in the world. We were a community that was proud. We were a community that took care of ourselves. We were a community that ensured our children were receiving the best quality education. We were a community that had our own doctors and lawyers and accountants, and we were a community that stressed education. We were a community that wanted to ensure that a legacy was laid and a legacy was left so that those that came behind us had the ability to build on that legacy, and they had the ability to take it even further. When you talk about a lot of the inventions that happened, a lot of them happened by African Americans, even though they were not able to get the patents for those. It was a lot of African Americans that actually developed a lot of that. There are things that happened that America is not proud of. And definitely here in the city of Memphis, there were things that happened that Memphians are not proud of. And a lot of people want you to forget that history. You know, when they talk about not teaching African American history, when I was in school, we had a class and a course called African American History. And because of that class, it made me want to do things like read about the College of Timbuktu. You know, people say from here to Timbuktu. That's a real place, people. It made me want to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. It made me want to read And the Walls Came Tumbling Down by Ralph Abernathy. See, because I lived through the civil rights movement here in the city of Memphis. My father was an activist. He took us to the marches down on Main Street. Don't shop, boycott. I still remember it ringing out in my head. I know a lot of people wonder, you know, what is the big deal, Michael, and why does black people have to have this time for themselves, and why do they want to celebrate all of the accomplishments, and why do they think that they're special, that they need a particular time to be able to talk about or bring up or remember a lot of the things that have happened? But you don't know the struggles many people, many other ethnic groups, because you didn't have to go through what African Americans went through coming to this country. A lot of people, when you look at Hispanics or a lot of the other ethnic groups, they want to come to this country. See, African Americans were forced to come to this country. Let's get it right now. And once again, I say I have nothing against my Italian brothers or my Arab brothers or my Jewish brothers or my Scottish brothers or my Caucasian brothers, or I'm not talking anything about you celebrating your heritage. And I'm not even I have a lot of Caucasian friends right now that are my friends, my true friends. I consider them friends. I've slept at their homes. I've eaten at their tables. But I am not going to forget what happened in the past. And that's something that a lot of people want to forget. But we need to have conversations about what happened in the past. And we need to be teaching our children how proud they should be of the legacy and the heritage that they have. Because a lot of times we get stuck on it started here in America, but it didn't start here in America. It started on the African continent. When you talk about you are descendants of kings and queens, when it talks about you are individuals that are heirs and joint heirs from some of the oldest cultures in the world. When you talk about the Moors, who are a proud people and vicious warriors, when you talk about the Mandinkas over in Africa, that's where our heritage started. And it even can be traced all the way back to the Egyptians, when they discovered the skeletons of Cleopatra. Her makeup was that of an African American woman. We had individuals that go all the way back to those times. It didn't just start here in America. It didn't just start as us being slaves. You know, back in the day, they would make sure that they taught people about your heritage. They weren't ashamed to tell you about individuals that worked in the cotton field. It wasn't ashamed to tell you about individuals that were slaves. They weren't ashamed to tell you about, in my case, I even have some Indian, Native American in my blood. If you saw my great-grandmother on my mother's side, she was Indian, part Indian. We have all kinds of heritages and legacies within us. And I say that because even if you look at me, I am not pure African. I have some Caucasian in here somewhere, probably some European in here somewhere. But I also have Indian in here somewhere. And that's why a lot of times, even though they made the rule, if you had any African-American blood in you, you were considered African-American because of the mixing of the races. How many people know about the massacre of Memphis, the Memphis massacre? Do you know that there was a massacre here in the city of Memphis? And the massacre occurred May the 3rd, 1866. It was actually from May the 1st to May the 3rd. And it said civilians and police killed 46 African Americans and injured more, burning 90 houses, 12 schools, 4 churches here, right here, in the city of Memphis. That was in 1866. Do a lot of you guys know, and see, this is why we need to educate ourselves. Because I didn't know that until I started digging and looking. But there are things that have happened in our past. There are things that have happened right here in the city of Memphis that a lot of people aren't aware of, and people really don't want you to know. And I'm not bringing this up to incite anything, and I don't want anybody to get mad because that's history. You know, I was one of the ones that said, leave that Bedford Forest statue up there. And I'm going to tell you why I was a proponent of leaving that statue up there. I was a proponent of leaving that statue up there because, see, they're trying to erase history. If nothing else, when I saw that statue, I knew that Nathan Bedford Forrest was an individual who was one of the individuals that came up with the KKK, which really hated African Americans, which suppressed African Americans, which killed African Americans, which persecuted African Americans. But I also know later in life, because you have to know the full story, later in life, Nathan Bedford Forrest also was an individual that helped African Americans after he came to, I don't know if the Lord touched him. I don't know if God came down and said, look, just like he did Saul on the Damascus Road and said, you're no longer going to be a publican. You're no longer going to prosecute the Jews. And he turned Paul into Saul, and Paul became an advocate for Christians after he had persecuted them. But anyway, so I was a proponent to leave that statue up there, maybe not for some of the same reason that a lot of the individuals that were advocating to leave it up, because it was part of their history, because it was part of their heritage, because it reminded them of something else. But my thing was, you can't keep erasing history, because if you keep erasing history, because I'm finding a lot of people are not reading. I'm finding a lot of people are not looking into what happened to African Americans. A lot of people are not as up on their history so that they don't let them repeat themselves. Because a lot of people are trying to erase it so that you don't understand what happened and all of the things that our race went through to be able to get to where we are today. If it was not for those that have came before me, I could not be on this television show right here, right now, talking to you. I could not have been the president of the Memphis Police Association. I could not have been an officer in the United States or a warrant officer in the United States Army. I could not have lived in some of the places that I have lived. I could not be afforded the lifestyle to which I have become accustomed. Now, don't get me wrong. You had millionaires back then, and I'm going to tell you about some of them. But you would not have had the frequency and the ability as we have now to be able to pursue your dreams. And see, and too often right now, we take that for granted. And too often we rest on our laurels. And too often we allow individuals, even within our own community, the ability to be able to use us and use the plight of our community and use the fact that we have so many impoverished people within our communities. But we have impoverished people within our communities a lot of times because those that we have elected and put in charge are allowing that to happen. How many people out there know where Black History Month came from and how it arose? Well, I'm going to tell you. Critics have long argued that Black history should be taught and celebrated year-round, not just during one month. It was Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, who set out in 1926 to designate a time to promote and educate people about Black history and culture, according to W. Marvin Delaney. He is a historian and the president of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Woodson envisioned a week-long celebration to encourage and coordinate teachings of Black history in public schools. He designated the second week of February as Negro History Week and galvanized fellow historians throughout the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and he founded it in 1915. The idea wasn't to place limitations, but really to focus and broaden the nation's consciousness on Black history. Wow. So it was originally started as Black History Week. So the reason February was chosen, primarily because the second week of the month coincides with the birthdays of both Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Lincoln was influential in the emancipation of the slaves, and Douglass was a former slave, was a prominent leader in the abolitionist movement, which fought to end slavery. Lincoln and Douglass were each born in the second week of February, so it was traditionally a time when African Americans would hold celebrations in honor of the emancipation. Thus, Woodson created Negro History Week around 2 birthdays as a way of commemorating the Black past. That's where Black History Week, or Negro History Week, first evolved, and then it turned into Black History Month eventually. It says 40 years after Ford formally recognized Black History Month, it was Barack Obama, the nation's first Black president, who delivered a message of his own from the White House, a place built by slaves. Black History Month shouldn't be treated as though it is somehow separate from our collective American history, or somehow just boiled down to the compilation of greatest hits from the March on Washington or from some of the sports heroes, Obama said. It's about lived, shared experiences of all African Americans, high and low, famous and obscure, and how the experiences have shaped and challenged the ultimately strengthened America, he continued. So then we got Black History Month. But I'm going to tell you, a lot of those that came before us definitely went through a lot to get to Black History Month. I can remember in the 60s being here in the city of Memphis. I can remember all of the marches that were occurring here in the city of Memphis. This is not something that I heard. This is not something that I had to read in a book. These are things that I, as a young Black male, experienced here in the city of Memphis. And I'm sure that a lot of you out there have your own stories and things that you experienced. You know, even though when we grew up here in the city of Memphis in the 60s, as far as I was concerned, the quality of life was good. Families loved each other and definitely rallied around each other. The communities came together to ensure that whatever was needed in the communities, those individuals had. Those communities protected those young people and those children. They nourished and gave them the ability to be able to want to ascend. It was expected that you would go to college, and that's how a lot of the Black colleges were formed. When you talk about TSU and the great heritage that TSU has, and when you talk about Mississippi State, Mississippi Valley, Lemoyne-on, when you talk about Clark, Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown, when you talk about all of these Black colleges that at that particular time, a lot of the young Blacks, those were the only colleges that they were able to go to because the colleges were segregated at that particular time. So you had those particular schools where individuals were going to that they excelled in. Tuskegee, Mississippi Valley, all of those great prestigious organizations that turned out all kinds of individuals who were scientists and doctors and lawyers, accountants, football coaches, football players, mayors, congressmen, senators. And I will tell you, even just going to the school here in the city of Memphis, I can remember April 3rd, 1968. I can remember being at Grant Elementary School. I can remember the teachers coming in, rushing us out of the classes because it was just heard that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. I can remember the burning buildings in this city. I can remember them rushing us to people's houses because they didn't have time. They didn't have the communication system as they have now, so they couldn't get a hold of a lot of people's parents. I can remember I was at some lady's house and I didn't even know who the lady was. And it was just all kinds of children at this house until I was able to get home or my mother was able to locate me. I can remember that. I can remember the tanks that were here in the streets in the city of Memphis. I remember that. I can remember those National Guardsmen and individuals standing in the streets with rifles. And us sitting on our porches or looking out the windows because Martin Luther King had come to Memphis and he had given his life. He had been assassinated right here in the city of Memphis. So yes, I wanted to, I find it so interesting. We can talk about people's panties and draws, and we can talk about penises, and we can talk about all of that stuff. If I talked about something like that, my Facebook page would be full. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to press on, and I'm going to continue to try to educate. Whether you want to hear it or not, but if you come to my page and if you look in, you're going to see. Because I think Black History Month is a big deal. I haven't really seen a lot of things that have been going on that commemorate Black History Month. And because I am a history buff and because I lived it, some people will say, oh, Mike, let's just forget about what happened. No, I can't forget about what happened because I lived through it. I can remember leaving a march down on Main Street, me, my brother, and my father. And I can remember a police officer stopped us, and this police officer tried to humiliate my father. But my father would not back down to this police officer. And he was a Caucasian police officer, a motorcycle police officer, motorcycle cop. My father would not back down. And I can remember that the police officer talked really bad to my father. But my father was not going to give that day, not in front of his two sons. And I can remember that's when I looked at my father and I was like, man, my dad is a strong man. I didn't say a strong black man at that time. My father is a strong man, and he stands on his principles. He stands for what is right. I was so proud of my father that day. And you better believe that had something to do with the shaping of the type of man that I would become. Because he showed me that day. Do not be afraid, even in the face of adversity. Do not be afraid, even in the face of racism. Do not be afraid, even in the face of the system coming against you. Don't be afraid. Do the things that you need to do to definitely let individuals know that you stand for something and you're not going to just fall for anything. Some of the major events that happened here in the city of Memphis was, number one, on April the 4th, 1968. We all know what that was. That was the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. You had prominent individuals that were from the city of Memphis. You had B.B. King, and And 3rd Street is named after him now. B.B. King, who was a world-renowned noted guitarist. You had Al Green, who was one of the most famous ministers in the city of Memphis. Before that, though, he was one of the most popular soul singers of the 70s. His contributions to R&B, gospel, and soul are still evident today, and his ministry at the Full Gospel Tabernacle continues to thrive. You had W.C. Handy, who was a, well, we know W.C. Handy played the trumpet. He was, because his first and most famous hit, Memphis Blues, was written right here in the Bluff City. We pay homage to W.C. Handy. You also had Robert Church, made significant contributions to the advancement of civil rights decades before there was widespread civil rights movement, known as the South's first black millionaire. Robert Church, first black millionaire, right here in the city of Memphis. And of course, you had Bishop Charles Mason, and we know he was one of the founders, if not the founder, one of the most famous ministers in Memphis. He was born to former slaves in 1866, and we just talked about 1866 when they had the massacre, the Memphis massacre in 1866. But he was born to former slaves in 1866, but went on to become the founder of the Church of God in Christ right here in the city of Memphis. Church of God in Christ is the largest Pentecostal denomination and the 5th largest Christian denomination in the United States. As such, its presence is felt strongly across Memphis as the church's headquarters are located right here in the city of Memphis. You know, there are a lot of things, and I'm going to throw some things out here so that when people go back and watch this video, if they choose to at a later time, that they can definitely see that there are a lot of things that actually occurred when it comes to African Americans. On February 12, 2019, the NAACP marked its 110th anniversary, spurred by growing racial violence in the early 20th century, in particular by 1908 race riots in Springfield, Illinois. A group of African American leaders joined together to form a new permanent civil rights organization, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That was February 12th, 1909, and said was chosen because it was the centennial anniversary of the birth of Abraham Lincoln. Man, see, I didn't know that. Abraham Lincoln is attached to a lot of things because he was the president who did the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves. You had heavyweight champ Jack Johnson became the first African-American man to hold the World Heavyweight Championship boxing title in 1909. He held on to the belt until 1915. The first African-American lawyer was John Mercer Langston. He was the first black man to become a lawyer when he passed the bar in Ohio in 1854. When he was elected to the post of town clerk for Brownhill, Ohio in 1855, Langston became one of the first African Americans ever elected to public office in America. John Mercer Langston was also the great uncle of Langston Hughes, famed poet and Harlem Renaissance. First protester and activist. Jesus, they've been doing that for a long time. While Rosa Parks was credited with helping and sparking the civil rights movement when she refused to give up her public bus seat to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, inspiring the Montgomery bus boycott. The lesser-known Claudette Colvin was arrested 9 months prior for not giving up her bus seat, also to a white passenger. So we hail Rosa Parks, but a lot of people don't know about Claudette Colvin, who had actually done it before Rosa Parks. So that just shows you that there were two women, two African-American women, that actually were protesting the fact of giving up their seats. And this was in places, you're talking about Montgomery, Alabama. You're talking about a place where they were lynching blacks back then. You're talking about a place where they didn't really play. But these strong African-American women had gotten to a point to where, as they said, enough is enough, and we're not going to take it anymore. You had Supreme Court, one of the first Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall, was the first African-American ever appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. He was appointed by President Lyndon B. Johnson and served on the court from 1967 to 1991. You know, the interesting thing about Thurgood Marshall, well, anyway, let's talk about George Washington Carver, a black man. This guy developed 300 derivatives. You hear me? 300 derivatives from the peanut. Among them, things that you really don't think about or you deal with every day. Cheese, milk, coffee, flour, ink, dyes, plastics, wood stains, soap, linoleum, medicinal oils, and cosmetics. A lot of that is contributed to George Washington Carver, who was a black man. How about that? The first senator, black African-American senator, Hiram Rhodes Revels, was the first African-American ever elected to the U.S. Senate. He represented the state of Mississippi from February 1870 to March 1871. You know, I find that very, very interesting because as suppressive as Mississippi was, and with them not wanting to ever give blacks their freedom, and with them still lynching blacks in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 50s, 60s, I know, at least anyway. And I say that because I was down in Mississippi in the 60s and down near Cleveland, Mississippi, and living out on a farm that my uncle was a sharecropper with my grandmother who was picking cotton. And they had even given me a little burlap bag, and I would follow her through the cotton fields as she was dragging her bag through. I wasn't trying to pick a whole lot. I was a little boy. Let's not fake the funk. I was a little boy. But they were expected to pick so much cotton. And I would even get so tired sometimes, I can remember riding on her sack. She would pull not only the cotton through the cotton field, but she would also pull me through the cotton field on her bag. I think they just made me a little burlap bag so that I'd stay out of the way and try to give me something to do. But I can remember they were still lynching African Americans or black people in Mississippi during that time, because I could hear the grown people talking about how, well, you know, you talk about Emmett Till, you know, you talk about those types of things that were still going on down there in Mississippi. And that's why you had bus riders going into Mississippi and all of that kind of stuff, trying to integrate a lot of the things that were happening in Mississippi. So he was the first senator. The first woman representative, Shirley Chisholm. A lot of you may remember her. She was the first African-American woman elected to the House of Representatives. She was elected in 1968 and represented the state of New York. She broke ground again 4 years later in 1972 when she was the first majority party African-American candidate and the first female candidate for president of the United States. Hold on. So not only was she the first African-American representative to the House of Representatives, but she broke ground again 4 years later in 1972 when she was the first major party African-American candidate and the first female period, candidate for President of the United States. Once again, an African-American woman. Then you had self-made millionaire, Madam C.J. Walker, who was born on a cotton plantation in Louisiana and became wealthy after inventing a line of African-American hair care products. She established Madam C.J. Walker Laboratories and was also known for her philanthropy. Oscar winner. You know, I always have to laugh at this one because a lot of people, you know, when you look at Gone with the Wind, Gone with the Wind, Hattie McDaniels was the first African-American performer who won an Academy Award, the film industry highest honor for her portrayal as a loyal slave governess in Gone with the Wind. You know, a lot of us today, we look back at some of those individuals like Hattie McDaniels and Bojangles, who was in all of those Shirley Temple movies, and those individuals, we look at them as Step and Fetch It, you know. We make light of their characters and the things that they did. But I would hope that we would look at it in a different way. During those times, those individuals endured things so that we could be where we are today. They could be in a movie, but they couldn't mingle with the staff. They could, you know, some of you guys, man, you wouldn't stand for any of that today. You would be looking at people like they were crazy. You know, they tell you you can't come to the Oscar party. They tell you you can't participate in some of the events or some of the ceremonies that surround all of these prestigious award ceremonies and different things like that. You would have had a fit. But the people like Hattie McDaniels, Step and Fetch It, Bojangles, and to allow those individuals to take the main stage while they sat in the back or they weren't even allowed in the room. These individuals made sacrifices so that we could do the things that we are currently doing today. And sometimes I think we take it for granted. I truly do. I think we take it for granted that, you know, you're able to go into any store that you want to go into. A lot of the stores back then, this is as late as the 50s and 60s, were segregated. You couldn't go into any store. You couldn't go into Walmart and just buy what you wanted to buy. You couldn't go into Lowenstein's back then that was downtown, or Lansky's, or some of those, Goldberg or what have you. You couldn't go into these places. That's why Beale Street was so important during that time. That's where the blacks went. That's where the black shop. It was on Beale Street. That's where the black shops were. That's where the black hotels were. That's where the majority of the African-American population hung out. And that was on Beale Street because you didn't have access to the rest of downtown. You couldn't be running around out there like you wanted to, because if you ran around out there like you wanted to, you had to walk with your head down. You had to say, "Yazza, boss." Hello? But on Beale Street, you could go down there and be a regular person because you were within the African-American community and you were within the area of town that allowed black people to come. You know, when entertainers came to town, they stayed on Beale Street. They couldn't just stay at the Hilton if the Hilton was here then. They couldn't just stay at any flop house or any hotel during that time. They were relegated to going to Beale Street. On April 5th, 1947, you had Jackie Robinson, who became the first African-American to play Major League Baseball. When he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers, he led the league in stolen bases that season and was named Rookie of the Year. Look how these people excel at what they do, given the opportunity. Given the opportunity. Now, when you look around sports, you have a lot of African Americans that are playing football in the NFL. I tell you what, watch the Super Bowl this weekend. You're going to see African Americans all over the place. You're going to see some of the African Americans. I was just looking at Inside Edition or something like that, where you had Kevin Hart, and they're bringing back Hollywood dads or whatever. But Kevin Hart said he bought one of those boxes for him and his wife. And I think Nick Cannon then was saying, well, hey, Kev, we don't get an invite. You didn't tell us. And he's like, no, I got it for me and my wife. Do you know some of those boxes down there were going for $1.2 million for a box? Some of those tickets are going for $56,000. Jesus Christ. And you have African Americans that are able to pay these types of monies for these types of events. And I think Nelly, I know on the show prior to mine, you had Tawana Murphy, who was talking about a video that was leaked of Nelly, but I'm going to talk about him in a different vein. I believe Nelly is hosting an after Super Bowl party for the Cincinnati Bengals, if I'm not mistaken. But you have people that are doing things like this now that are from the African American community. And that's why sometimes I say I think we've forgotten about our heritage and our lineage and the things that people went through. The first black billionaire, before Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jordan joined the Billionaires Club, Robert Johnson became the first African-American billionaire when he sold the cable station he founded, BET, Black Entertainment Television, in 2001. Of course, the first African-American vice president was here as recently as January 2001. That was Kamala Harris. Became the first woman of African-American or Asian, because she's part African-American and part Asian, I believe, to become vice president. Kamala Harris's mother immigrated to the United States from India. No, she's not India. And her father immigrated from Jamaica. So those were immigrants that came to this country, and she wasn't part Asian, so I don't know why they put Asian descent in there. Her mother was from India, and her father immigrated from Jamaica. But her father was African American, so therefore she was considered African American. Remember, any blood that's within, then they want you to check that box that says African American. You also had a black population of the United States in 1870. Well, the black population in the United States in 1870 equated to 4.8 million. You had Jesus, that's nothing these days. You got cities bigger than that. In 1870, the African-American population in the United States was 4.8 million. And the last time that they counted was in 2019, and the number of black residents in the United States was 46.8 million. When you look at the overall population of the United States, that is still not a lot. I think we were approximately, it's either 14 or 16% of the population here in the United States at this current time. Once again, I'm a firm believer that you definitely need to know your heritage. You definitely need to know that as African Americans, we are descendants from individuals that have had major accomplishments in the history and the building of the United States of America. You know, when you talk about the national anthem for the African American community, Lift Every Voice and Sing. How many of you guys know that song? Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven rings, ring with the harmony of dignity. Or something to that effect. I can't remember the words. I never could remember songs. Miss Debbie back there singing. Unto the listening sky, let us rejoice. rolling sea. But anyway, the first time as an assembly making President Abraham Lincoln, there go Abraham Lincoln again, birthday at Staten School, Florida's first high school for black students, Brother James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson had written the lyrics and composition for the song, which within 2 years is considered the African-American national anthem. James actually had composed Lift Every Voice and Sing as a poem in 1899. And John set it to music for the assembly for the first earlier that year, according to the Library of Congress, which adds the song and permeates with the legacy of slavery, only 2 generations gone and haunted by the continued violence oppressing African Americans in the United States. Man, I could go on and on. It's just so much. You know, George H. White, the last black American elected to Congress, leaves office. No other black person is elected to Congress for nearly 3 decades until the Oscars, until Dr. D. Priest takes office in 1929. And will be nearly a century before another black resident of North Carolina elected to Congress. And it's on and on and on. History, when you talk about the Tuskegee Airmen, Jesus, you know, it's just pages and pages and pages. Black residents of Nashville boycott streetcars to show their disdain for racial segregation, stretching through 1907. It will become the largest example of an urban transportation protest before the Montgomery bus boycott, half a century later, according to Black Past. On and on and on. I mean, just so many things. Madam C.J. Walker, a washwoman working and living in Denver, develops hair care products. On and on. In response to the Springfield riots, a number of other incidents, the NAACP is founded. Du Bois, working with Mary White Overton, Ida B. Wells, and others, formed the organization whose mission is to end inequality. I bring all of this to your attention, and I would hope that you would go back and you would read some of this on your own. Like I say, I'm going to say it again. I have nothing against my Caucasian brothers and sisters. I have a lot of Caucasian friends. I have nothing against the Italians, the Irish, the Scottish, the Jewish, the German, the Polish, the Asian, the Hispanic. I have nothing against any of those ethnic groups, nothing whatsoever. But I am a firm believer that we as African Americans, we need to celebrate our heritage and the things that we went through. We need to teach our kids about the history that our ancestors have endured as we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and as we enjoy a lot of the liberties that have been afforded to us. Once again, I say I thank those that rode the buses. I thank those that boycotted and had dogs and water hoses put on them, as you see in a lot of the newsreels when you see about the civil rights movement. I thank Dr. Martin Luther King and his family for giving him to us so that, unfortunately, he was able to come to Memphis to fight for 2 sanitation workers that had been killed in the back of a garbage truck right here in the city of Memphis. I thank those individuals that marched here in the streets of Memphis. I thank those individuals at IEBEW 1733 or 1288. I know it's one of them. It's 1733, I believe, which is an historic African-American institution when it comes to unions. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to Wake Up Memphis, not Wake Up Memphis, for Memphis 360. Man, I still get it confused with my old show, Wake Up Memphis. I want to thank you for tuning in to Memphis 360. I know it was not one of those exciting shows to whereas we're talking about all kinds of crazy things, but sometimes you got to bring it down a notch. And I do believe that it is incumbent upon us that we take that time and that we educate people in regards to our history and what's going on and why you should be proud and why we should be conducting ourselves in a certain manner now, today, because those that gave their lives so that we could do that. And once again, my hearts and my prayers go out to those families that have lost loved ones, Aisha Taylor, and the Jones family, and Trey.
Bring your family. I treat you like family. Come see me, Issa, here at the #1 dealership in the Mid-South, 4605 Houston Levy Road, Sunrise, Collierville. Come on down, check out my inventory with hundreds of vehicles to choose from, pre-owned, new, and certified.
Good news from Sunrise Chevrolet. Get in your new vehicle today. Come on in, ask for Esau. Bankrupt, slow pay, bad credit, it's okay. Let Esau put you in your brand new truck or car today when you shop at Sunrise Chevrolet, Collierville.
And don't forget, ask for me, Issa.
Bedroom therapy, made for him, thinking of her.
Let me tell you about bedroom therapy. It's a new year, y'all, and I got great news. Steve at Bedroom Therapy, formerly known as the Erector, is returning to Memphis, Tennessee with that $5 special. All roads lead to SVP Complex, 3765 Premier Code. And he's bringing all the products. He's bringing a male honey, he's bringing a female honey, he's bringing the capsules, and the famous coffee for just $5. Now remember, you gotta purchase a minimum of 5. A minimum of 5. Men, it is always about pleasing the woman. Happy wife leads to a happy life. So I'm gonna see y'all Saturday, right here at SVP Complex, y'all. You may see me. Later.
Come spend the night with me. I'll take you to ecstasy. I got the bedroom therapy. I got the bedroom therapy.
Bedroom therapy, made for him, thinking of her. Herbal products made to enhance your experience, unlike any other herbal products you have used. Our products, Bedroom Therapy, Black Bull, and Zulu Warrior, one great formula for all, will increase your ability to perform, rebound, restart, last, and love. Ladies, you can get it for your husband, boyfriend, father, brother, cousin, uncle. They will adore you because of the magic that you have helped them discover. Bedroom Therapy, made for him, thinking of her.
Come spend the night with me. I'll take you to ecstasy. I got the bedroom therapy. I got the bedroom therapy.
Bedroom Therapy, made for him, thinking of her.
For over 20 years, Opox has been keeping the Mid-South
warm in the winter and cool in the summer.
Opox is family-owned and operated, so our family will take care of yours every step of the way. And right now, you can double up and save. Buy a new AC unit and get 50% off a new furnace to match it. Count on Opox for fast and professional heating and cooling services. Count on Opox.